Up next, we have Colin Fowlie. We're going to play a track from his debut release, which is a beautiful piece of artwork. We're going to talk about that and the music involved. Colin has been very busy in the last year. He's undergone a huge personal change, which allowed him to take this journey. We'll talk about that and the making of his album, Party Music. So bear with us. We'll talk to Colin Fowlie here in just a few minutes' time. Once I very clumsily put this record back on here and drop the needle very gently and start it up again. This is Another Drug. Colin Fowlie from Party Music. We'll talk to Colin here in a couple of minutes' time. That's Colin Fowlie and Another Drug from his debut solo album.
Yes, sir.
Party Music. Welcome to Wax Wednesday, Colin.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. My pleasure. First thing that I notice about this release is the striking artwork. It's a beautiful, beautiful jacket.
It's probably the best thing about the record.
Oh, no, that's not true. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that's nice artwork. Who's responsible for that?
So that was Ryan and Kennedy from Might As Well Creations, and
Okay.
The front panel was actually I commissioned them to do it, and was sending them early copies of the acoustic demos for the record, and just bouncing ideas back and forth, and we kind of landed on the theme of something beautiful inside a wasteland, and felt that was kind of representative of that particular body of work, and they absolutely crushed it in the painting, and so that's a full I think it's like 3 feet by 3 feet.
That's a full canvas,
and it's in my basement. Yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah, and
beautiful.
The back panel was it's a section of another work that they were doing that I saw, and one of the tracks on the album is called Amusement Park, and that was actually the album artwork when I put that out as an EP.
Okay.
And it just kind of looked like a Ferris wheel, the butterflies in a circle.
Gotcha.
And so that then went on to become the back panel, and I released a couple of EPs before the album, and the plan was to have that artwork sort of feed into the final product, much like the music was too.
Yeah.
They're wonderful people, and it was a pleasure to work with them. So
excellent. I want to commend you as well. Like this is a huge year for you, Colin.
yeah.
Like you took a huge leap of faith to pursue your art. How's that been so far? You quit your job to do this.
I did, yeah.
And any regrets?
No.
None whatsoever.
Zero.
Good
Zero.
for you.
I have less money now than I ever have in my adult life, but I'm happier than I've ever been.
But you're fulfilling a dream.
I absolutely am, yeah.
Yeah.
And no regrets at all. I haven't starved to death yet. There's less of me than there was at the beginning of the year, but I'm still relatively well fed, and my wife is really supportive as well, and that kind of keeps me going. So.
I want to comment on the album title, Party Music.
Yes.
When I'm very familiar with your music, and party music doesn't necessarily jump out as like you're a fantastic songwriter, but sometimes you look at a darker vision or
most of the time
that sort of thing. There's maybe even some cynicism in your lyrics.
Yeah, absolutely. So.
It's a tongue in cheek, obviously.
It is, big time. So somebody had a copy for review, and they reached out to me before publishing the review, and they asked, "So, is this like your sense of humor, or are you just not self-aware? Like, where's that coming from?" And so actually, the title of the album is a bit of a tip of the hat to somebody that's been an inspiration for me and my favorite songwriter, and that's Jason Isbell.
Right.
And there was an interview where he was struggling to answer the question, like, what kind of music do you make? And he's like, I don't know. It's not the kind of music you put on at parties. And I think I was talking to Eddie Young about it, and we were joking around. I said, you know what? I'm calling my album Party Music. And if somebody goes on Spotify to try and find a soundtrack for their next house party, joke's on them. I get my, fraction of a cent. And
Well, again, this is Wax Wednesday here at the Muse. We do this once a month, although this is a very special night. We are sponsored by Backstreet Records. We have albums in the back for people to peruse. Come on down, pick up copies of each of these albums we're discussing tonight because each of these artists have brought some down for sale. They'll sign them. You can high-five them and talk to them yourself about this process. But, Colin, I was going to ask you, actually, about some of your favorite songwriters because, lyrics are obviously a huge part of what you do. And you must draw inspiration from a lot of different guys, aside from Isabel. Who else do you listen to?
Well, I mean, I've been really fortunate to be introduced to a lot of artists that aren't super famous, and just like recent discoveries that I dig into, and these are people at a level like if I reach out to them online that they're going to respond back. Yeah. But some that I've been listening to a lot lately, Noah Dirksen, he put out an incredible album. Lucas Chasson put out an incredible album. They're both from the prairies. I listen to lots of I like Jack White. I listen to like Leonard Cohen and all kinds of different stuff. I was a child of the '90s, so the grunge movement was a big thing for me, and I love that. Like Alice in Chains was my favorite jam at that point in time. So, I have a variety of different influences. Chris Stapleton recently has become a big one as well, and he kind of is, I wouldn't say the other end of the spectrum, but his songs are a little bit less, in depth than like an Isbell lyric or something like that.
Right.
And honestly, I don't try and emulate any of those guys. I think that if you do that, then you just wind up producing like a crappier version of what they're doing, and so it's really just I digested a bunch of stuff and kind of given myself permission to just write your own songs.
Is that the biggest trick for songwriters, is to find their own voice? Do you think is that the key?
I think so. When it comes to that kind of songwriting, like there are certainly genres of music where having some lyrics just for the sake of having a song, that's fine and that works. Probably for party music, if you will. But like I want to hear somebody's own sort of authentic voice.
Yeah. Now you've been I give you full credit because you've been kind of looking outside of the traditional venues of playing live, going down to Halifax, going to Ontario, Quebec, or whatever. You've actually traveled down the eastern seaboard a little bit, and explored those markets. Now, how much? First off, how much of a challenge is that? And second off, how do you find those audiences are for supporting new, up and coming original music?
It's been really good. My name's not out there yet, so occasionally there's some shows where there aren't too many people there. But when I've when I have an audience in front of me, it goes really well. Not to say that it doesn't go well in the traditional markets you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like I've played those places also and had a great response. For me, where this is my full-time career, and I want to be playing live at least 2 or 3 times a week for this to be sustainable. It's just a numbers game. Well, I mean, it's more than a numbers game. Like a lot of my favorite songwriters and whatnot come from that part of the world, and people like that kind of music, and I think that they like the kind of music that I make as well. But if I drive 30 hours from Fredericton and I head out to Trans-Canada, I'm in Kenora, Ontario.
Yeah.
But if you go up to Holton and hit the 95 and drive for 30 hours, you're in Florida. You've passed
a number
150 million people versus 10.
Yeah.
It's a
good
big
point. Yeah.
right?
That's a great perspective. You've had a little mishap out in Lethbridge you were telling us about before we got going. That's all part of the the hazards of touring in Canada in the winter.
So the entire day in Lethbridge, other than the venue and the gig itself, was a mishap, if I'm being honest with you.
One of those days.
Yeah. It's a town with it has an opiate problem.
Yep.
An opioid problem. And so the first thing that we do, and I was touring with Liam Keith-Jacques of Montgomery Street Band fame and Falling Leaves and Crossroad Devils. Anyway, whenever we kill time, we go find a guitar shop. We're not real rock stars. Like I found out the secret over a couple of tours with him as to how he got so good at guitar, and that he never stops playing. So anytime we stop for more than 5 minutes, he gets a guitar out and practices something. And so the first thing we do in any town is to go check out the music stores, and the boutique guitar shop or the local shop was closed, despite being advertised as open. We showed up and it was on lockdown. So we went over to Long and McQuaid, and we were playing around in the acoustic room and met a couple of folks, and then an indigenous elder and his son were talking to us, and they wanted to have a prayer circle for us before to wish us well on our tour. So we did that, and we promptly left there and went to Google directed us to the mall in order to get a coffee from Tim Hortons, and so we did that. I hate malls. And we were trying to find a couple of other things in stores. Nothing, no luck. And so I just stopped to get gas. And this guy who was on something real good, was wearing a full monster mask. And this is back in September. And he's stumbling around the parking lot of the gas station and apparently thought that I had said something to him. So he kind of wanted to fight me.
Right.
And his friend corralled him away and I guess let him know that I wasn't the one that he was taking issue with. And so after that, we wound up getting in a fender bender. Somebody tried to sort of aggressively drive around me when I was, I
That's
was
a
in
hell of a day in Lethbridge.
unfamiliar territory, and he clipped the van, our rental van, and I'm still dealing with that paperwork. And had a great show. The Slice in Lethbridge is a wonderful venue, and Derek, the owner, is just great people. But while I was on stage, I looked out the window and saw that the snow was starting to really come down, and we were driving from Lethbridge to Calgary that night.
And this is September?
This is September 28th. I was just looking at the police report today, actually. And anyway, we got about 40 centimeters of snow. It snowed all that night, all the next day. And we had a gig on the Ironwood stage in Calgary the next night, which was a big room. We were looking forward to it.
Yeah.
And it never stopped snowing. And so we wound up with 10 people in front of us, which was kind of a bummer. And I said to Liam, the next time that somebody wants to have a prayer circle for us, we're going to decline, because apparently I've been flying.
Pass.
I've been flying under God's radar up to this point, and he's now aware of my presence, and it's just been a series of micro smitings ever since. So.
Colin
Thanks, but no
Fowlie,
thanks.
Party Music. We'll talk to Colin here again a little more coming up. We're going to play another one off this Sanctuary. Care to set it up for us?
Yeah. So this is actually a tune that it was one of the first songs that I wrote, and I finished it at a songwriters intensive as part of Shivering Songs that was being hosted by Michael Feuerstack.
Yeah.
And it was an amazing experience, and that's where I wrote Sanctuary. We recorded a more rock and roll version with my band, Art of the Possible. Yeah. And when it came time to put this record out, that was the only song that got re-recorded from a past project, and that is because Eddie Young really wasn't happy with the way we did it. He's like, that's not proper. So we talked about it, and I kind of gave him production rights for that particular song.
Very cool.
And
Congrats, Eddie.
And we borrowed Dylan Anthony from Kill Chicago.
Beautiful.
So the track is pretty stripped down. It's myself on vocals and 2 acoustic guitars, and Dylan making everything beautiful with the pedal steel.
The steel.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, here's Sanctuary from Colin Fowlie's Party Music. It's Wax Wednesday here at the Muse. We'll have more with Colin here in a few minutes' time. I think I hear that Dylan Anthony slide right there. That's Sanctuary. That's Colin Fowlie from his Party Music album. Oh. Got the stripping music now. Okay, we're going to kill that right now. While I ask you the next question, I'm going to clumsily flip the record and get to the next song we're going to play. But I did want to ask you, we were kind of talking off air here while that song was playing, like what's next for Colin in 2020. You've got some places you want to get to.
Yep. Yep.
What would they be, and why are those places important to you?
Well, so first off, like I've already started playing in the States, and but I've been limited to New England so far, and the plan is to plan a tour. How many times I can say a plan in a sentence? Try and head south, and I'd like to get, ideally at least as far as Nashville. Check that out, which would be amazing.
Well, of course, yeah.
And also the UK and potentially the rest of Europe as well. And they're very real. There are irons in the fire. In
well,
those places,
having just come from visiting the UK, once you get over there,
Yep.
Moving around within the UK and Europe is relatively quick.
Yep.
And relatively easy as well. So I can see why that would make a lot of sense. Any countries over there that you'd really want to hit?
Well, when I was younger, I did a tour around Europe, not with music, just sightseeing, if you will.
Yeah.
And parts of Eastern Europe, where I'd love to go play in like Dubrovnik or something like that in Croatia.
Yeah.
It's just an incredible part of the world.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the England and Scotland and Ireland and all the things. I want to play all the places. Anywhere people want to sit down and listen to my music, I want to get there and play it for them. That's
and one thing I was saying to Krista, about Europe, and one of the things that I noticed about it is the history is evident everywhere, and it makes you realize how young Canada is.
Oh yeah,
in terms in relationship to other countries over there, we're pretty young.
Well, you can wind up in public places like using a toilet that's older than Canada, right? So it is incredible, and just a totally different appreciation for history when you're there.
Yeah,
and I've heard, I haven't not gone over there to play myself, but I've heard that live audiences really do appreciate.
Crowds are good. They're
original music, and it doesn't need to be big name, mass produced stuff. So I'm looking forward to getting over there.
Now, backpedaling here a little bit, when you mentioned Nashville, that must be intimidating as a thought as well, to think about heading to Nashville as well, which is kind of considered the home of at least country songwriting for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of broken hearts and dreams in the streets of Nashville. So does that concern you at all, or?
I'm not going to move there.
No,
but
no.
It not really. It's I don't know. It'll sound arrogant, but if I get in front of a crowd of people that are listening to me, then it goes well. And I think that even it doesn't matter if that's if it's Fredericton or Nashville. I think that if I find the right audience, if I find my audience, then it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And every time I take a new step forward, like a big step forward, I get anxious about it. I'll get the nerves and the stage fright, and I think that would be one. The first time you sit down to a gig in Nashville, it's one that I'd have to
Bluebird Cafe
go
or
for
something.
a little bit of a walk and calm the nerves. But so far I've still been able to rise to those occasions, and I think that Nashville would be no different. I hope.
Yeah. One thing that you can say about your talents, Colin, is you're a very pure singer. You're a very powerful singer. How long have you been working on that singing style of yours? How long have you been singing? Period.
Since I was a kid.
Yeah, I was going to guess that.
Yeah, my parents noticed me singing along to some of Dad's records, and they put me in singing lessons and a boys' choir when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I went with that until I could no longer stand being in the boys' choir, and worked with some great instructors through high school. And then I took a lot of time off through my 20s, and I didn't start really singing again until my 30s. And but I had that foundation, and I knew the proper technique for doing certain things, and I knew when I wanted to use the proper technique. I knew when I wanted to not do that. And listening to other great vocalists, and just not trying to emulate them, but just trying to be inspired and come up with new ways to sing, or try to push myself, or not and when I say push myself, not necessarily louder, take risks, like sing soft, almost at a whisper, and just be willing to experiment and try things out. And I work on I practice vocals like it's an instrument. You know, I also play the guitar, and I spend hours a day working on the guitar. I probably practice more guitar right now than vocals, but it's the same thing. Like I'll go to try and hit certain things, and okay, what would I want to do there, and just, you know, train myself and you know, do the reps and do the work.
Getting back to the album Party Music, are there songs that are recorded that didn't quite make the project that you kind of holding on to, or did you pretty much have this mapped out when you started out?
It was mapped out, so we didn't record any extra songs except for a tune that was released. We wanted to put out some bite-size pieces before the full album, just to feed sort of the current content culture.
Sure.
And so there was a song called Taker that was recorded and released on the first EP, which was Harmony. And that didn't make the final cut. And in the meantime, I'd written a song called Photographs that kind of bumped it off the album. So,
Okay, yeah.
and, you know, since we recorded it, I started singing it in a different key, and it kind of, it morphed. So that was the only one really on the cutting room floor that got recorded. There were some others that were in demo form that we didn't wind up tackling in the studio.
Do you find as your songwriting career develops and you get more songs under your belt that you've outgrown a lot of the earlier stuff you've written, or do you kind of still mold it or kind of work with it?
What I'll do is, you know, when I have to sit down and play for 2 hours, I kind of need all my songs. But
Yeah, I guess.
what I'll sometimes do if I've gotten bored with an older one is I'll sit down and treat it as though it's somebody else's song that I was going to cover and going to kind of put my own spin on it. So I'll take and refresh a song and put my own spin on my own tune, and then it kind of becomes something new. You know, there's one or two from like the first EP that I put out that I don't really play much anymore. But you know, I still like playing them, and there's still a place for them in a lot of my set lists. You know,
They're still your babies.
Yeah. You know, unlike my children, I do have, you know, some that I favor more than others, but and sometimes I'll go back to an old one that I kind of just got sick of. I'm like, you know, that wasn't a bad tune. I'll maybe dust that one off and play it in a couple of sets and
see how it goes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Party Music, Colin Fowlie's debut solo album. We're going to hear another track from it. This is called Drifting Out, right?
Yeah.
Care to tell us a little bit about something about this one? Where are you coming from with this one?
Well, this was a collaboration in the studio. So Stephen Lewis produced it with me.
Nice.
And honestly, Jay Merrill should have probably had production credit on it as well. He was the engineer on it. And it was just a really fun and creative process working with those guys. And on Drifting Out, we brought in Steve Hubbard, who plays guitar on some of the tracks as well. And, you know, we just really workshopped it and had fun with it. And I like the way that the record version turned out. And it totally changed the way we played it live. And yeah, it's just the whole most of the entire team was involved on this track, so I figured we should probably play.
It's a good one to play.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Colin Fowlie, good luck with the new album. Good luck with everything in the next few months. Don't be a stranger, and we're gonna play "Drifting Out" from Party Music. This is Colin Fowlie. We'll be coming back with Peter Hicks very, very soon of My Black Ram.